Okay, here's our last video for compound interest in APY. So in this video, we're going to look at something different. We're going to find annual percentage yield. And this is what your interest rate comes out to be when you consider the compounding periods. So on our formula chart, we will be choosing between one of these two here under APY. If you see the word continuous, you will use this one. Otherwise, you will use this one. So notice there's no time, there's no principal, it's just periodic interest rate here and number of times compounded. Continuous is even easier because all we do is plug in interest rate. So if we take a look at number 7 and 8, notice I made a note over here. We want to round this decimal to 4 decimal places. The reason is we're going to change it to a percent. We want our percent rounded to 2 decimal places. So it's important that you have at least 2 places after it's been changed to a percent. So always do at least 4 places for the decimal. All right, so the first one we have 6.3% compounded monthly. So here's our rate. And we know that M is going to be 12. All right, so I don't see anything about continuous on here, so we will be choosing this formula. Okay, so our answer is going to be an interest rate. So 1 plus I raised to the m minus 1. Remember, you always start with the formula. So I is going to be, just like it was in the previous problems, r divided by m. So change r to a decimal, 0.063, 2 places to the left, and then put that over 12. So when I plug this in, I get 1 plus 0.063 divided by 12. Notice there's no n in this problem. We go back to the m, so m is 12, and then put our minus 1. Okay, so as far as parentheses, the only parentheses we need are these. We don't need any more in our calculator. All right, so let's open our parentheses. 1 plus 0.063 divided by 12. Close the parentheses. We're going to raise it to a power of 12, and then we're going to minus 1. So notice we get a big decimal. So I want to go to 4 decimal places. It's very important that you round correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the last place we're going to write, but notice the one next to it's a 5. So this 8 is going to become a 9. So we're going to write that as 0.064 9. All right, so then we can change it back into a percent. So we move it over 2 places and we get 6.49%. Your answer should always be a little bit higher than the rate that you started with. Now you have to be really careful because if you rounded this to 2 decimal places and then moved it, you would get, well, actually be 0.06. You would get 6%. And there's a big difference between 6% and 6.49%. So make sure you keep at least 4 decimal places. That way when you move, your percentage is rounded to at least 2 decimal places. All right, so for the next example, we're going to keep the same rate. We're going to use the 6.3. But this time we're going to be compounding weekly. So remember there are 52 weeks in a year. So m is going to be 52. Okay, I'm going to be using the same formula. My I is going to be r over m. So the 0.063 stays the same from the last problem, but now we're dividing by 52. So when I plug that in, I get 1 plus 0.063 divided by 52. I'm going to raise that to a power of 52. Remember, we use m in both places here. And then don't forget to minus 1. When you put this in your calculator, make sure you put those parentheses right there. All right, so let's go ahead and try that. Oops, 1 plus 0.063 divided by 52. Close your parentheses, raise it to a power of 52, and then minus 1. Okay, once again, we want 4 decimal places, 0.0649. This one's tricky. The 8 tells us to round the 9 up. So what that's going to round to is 0.064. The 49 is going to round up to a 50. So that one will be 0.0650. And then when I move it 2 places to the right, 6.50%. So we can see by compounding more times, we bumped the percentage up, not very much, but just a tiny bit. All right, so for 9 and 10, we're asked, which is better for the given situation? 8.2% compounded continuously, or 8.4% compounded quarterly. Now this is an investment, so this is putting money maybe into a retirement account, something like that. So for an investment, interest is money that you're making. So for an investment, a higher rate is better. All right, so let's take a look at this one. This one says 8.2% compounded continuously. So we haven't seen that word continuously yet on this video. So when I look at my formula chart, instead of using this formula, I'm going to use this one. All right, so this is going to be e to the r minus 1. So I'm going to try to do this in 2 different sections. All right, so the only thing I have to plug in here is the rate. I do have to change it to a decimal. So 0.082. Notice there's no parentheses on that. The calculator is going to open parentheses on the e, so you're going to get those whether you want them or not. So we want to make sure just to put that interest rate in parentheses. So when we go to the calculator, remember the e is going to be above the ln, so second ln. That gives you your power of e. I put 0.082. Make sure you close those parentheses before you subtract the 1. All right, we want 4 decimal places, 0.0854, but the number next to it's a 5, so we're going to round that 4 up, and it's going to be 0.0855. All right, so 0.0855, we change that to 8.55%. All right, we want to compare that with a higher interest rate, compounded quarterly. So quarterly means 4 times a year. So this one is not continuous interest, so we're back to that other formula. 1 plus I to the m minus 1. All right, so remember that I is r over m, so 0.084 divided by 4. And then remember, we raised that to a power of 4. In this formula, these match. On the compound interest one, it does not. All right, so here's our parentheses. And we're going to plug this in and then round it to 4 decimal places. All right, so open your parentheses. 1 plus 0.084 divided by 4 raised to the 4th power minus 1. All right, again, we want 4 decimal places, so 0.086. When I get to the last decimal place, it's a 6, but the number next to it's an 8, so I'm going to round that up. All right, 2 places to the right, and I get 8.67%. Now remember, we want to know which one is better. When we're looking at an investment, higher is better. All right, so we're going to say this is better. So if you had a choice between those, that's the one you would choose. You are going to make a little bit more money. Now it's a whole different story if it's a loan, because the interest is extra money that you have to pay back to the bank. So when we're looking at a loan, lower is better. All right, so we've got 6.1% compounded semi-annually. Now we haven't seen that before, but that means twice a year. So M is 2. Now notice it's not a continuous interest problem, so we're not going to use the E. We're going to use 1.I raised to the m minus 1. All right, so remember that I is the interest rate as a decimal, 0.061, divided by m, which is 2. We're going to raise that to a power of 2, and then minus 1. Sorry about all the noise. All right, so here are our parentheses. All right, so we're going to plug that in. And round it to 4 decimal places. So my 4th decimal place is my 9. The number after it's a 3, so it's just going to stay a 9. 0.0619. And that's going to give us 6.19%. Now remember, it should always be a little higher than the number that you started with. All right, our last one, we're going to go a little lower on the rate, but it's compounding more often. So weekly, remember, M is going to be 52. And again, this is not continuous, so I don't want the formula with the E. I'm going to do 1 plus 0.06 for my 6%. I'm going to divide that by 52, which is my M. I'm going to raise that to a power of 52, and then minus my 1. Okay, one more time on the parentheses, just to remind you where those go. All right, so let's plug that one in. A lot of the struggle here is just learning how to enter it correctly on the calculator. And a lot of that is where to put the parentheses. So I'm getting 0.0617, but there's a 9 next to it. So that 7 needs to round up to be an 8. So 0.0618. All right, so that's going to round to 6.18%. Now remember, for a loan you want lower. Now there's not much difference between them, but this is a little bit lower. This would save you a little bit of money. So this is the better option for a loan. So lower APY for a loan, higher APY for an investment.